Imagine a country that starts as a collection of colonies on the edge of the world. No global influence, no dominant economy, no real power compared to the empires of Europe. And then, within just a few generations, it becomes the most powerful economy on Earth. Not just stronger than one country, stronger than all of them. That country is the United States, and the way it got there wasn't random. Because when you look at history, it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in stages, quiet shifts that slowly move power in one direction. In the early 1800s, the United States was still small. In fact, it made up less than 2% of the global economy at the time. Meanwhile, Europe dominated everything: trade, industry, global influence. But underneath that balance, something was changing. The United States wasn't just growing, it was industrializing. Railroads expanded across the country. Factories began producing at scale. And within a few decades, it had already overtaken Britain as the world's leading manufacturer. But even then, it still wasn't the dominant power. Because being rich is not the same as being in control. And for most of its early history, America stayed out of global conflicts, focused inward, growing quietly. Until something changed. A series of decisions that pushed the country beyond its borders and into the global system. Because becoming a superpower isn't just about wealth, it's about timing. And more importantly, it's about what happens when everyone else weakens. Because while the United States was building, the rest of the world was heading towards something else: war. And that's where the real shift begins. Because the moment that changed everything wasn't when America became stronger, it was when the rest of the world became weaker. And what happened next didn't just grow the American economy, it positioned it at the center of the global system itself. So what actually changed? How does a country go from growing economy to the center of the global system? It didn't happen through one single moment. It happened through a series of events that reshaped the entire world. And it starts with something that, at first glance, has nothing to do with economic power: war. When World War I broke out, Europe was still the dominant force in the global economy. But war changes priorities. Resources get redirected. Production shifts toward military needs. And economies that once drove global trade start to strain under pressure. Meanwhile, the United States was in a very different position. It wasn't fighting on its own soil. Its infrastructure remained intact. Its factories kept running. And more importantly, it became a supplier, selling goods, materials, and equipment to countries involved in the war. Which meant something critical started to happen. Money began to flow into the United States from the rest of the world. Countries that had once been lenders were now borrowing, and the United States was becoming a creditor. That shift alone changed the balance of power, but it didn't stop there. Because just a couple of decades later, it happened again: World War II. And this time, the impact was even bigger. Europe and much of Asia were devastated. Cities destroyed, industries wiped out, economies struggling to rebuild. But the United States was left standing. Its production capacity had expanded massively during the war. Its economy had grown. And once again, it was in a position to supply the world. But here's where things take a different turn. Because after the war, the United States didn't just participate in the global economy, it helped redesign it. In 1944, representatives from dozens of countries came together to build a new financial system. This became known as the Bretton Woods Agreement. And at the center of that system was the US dollar. Instead of every country managing its own separate system, Currencies were tied to the dollar, and the dollar itself was tied to gold, which meant something powerful. If you wanted stability, if you wanted to trade globally, if you wanted access to the system, you needed dollars. And that created demand, not just inside the United States, but across the entire world. At the same time, new institutions were created. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. Organizations designed to stabilize economies, but also built around the system the United States helped establish. And slowly, the center of global finance shifted. From Europe to the United States. From multiple competing systems to one dominant structure. And at the heart of it was a single currency, the US dollar, which meant that economic power was no longer just about production, it was about position, being at the center of the system, where money flows through you, not around you. And once that position is established, it becomes very difficult to replace. Because the more the world depends on your system, the more influence you have over it. Which leads to a bigger question. If America became powerful by sitting at the center of the system, what does that mean for the world today? So by the end of World War II, the shift was complete. The United States wasn't just a large economy anymore. It was at the center of the global system. And that position came with something more than wealth. It came with influence. Because when your currency is used around the world, when global trade depends on your system, when other countries rely on your financial stability, you don't just participate in the economy, you shape it. Interest rates set in one country start to affect markets everywhere else. Decisions made at the center ripple outward across the entire world. And for decades, that system held. Even when the link between the dollar and gold eventually ended, the structure remained. Because by that point, the world was already built around it. Trade was priced in dollars. Reserves were held in dollars. Financial systems were connected through it. And once a system reaches that level of scale, it becomes very difficult to move away from. But here's the part that matters. Because becoming a superpower wasn't just about being stronger than everyone else. It was about being in the right position at the right time when the system was being rebuilt. While other economies were recovering, the United States was defining the rules. And those rules still shape the world today. But that also raises an important question. Because systems like this don't last forever. They evolve. They shift, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. And when they do, the balance of power can change just as quickly as it did before. So the real story isn't just how America became the world's economic superpower, it's how systems are built and how they eventually change. Because once you understand that, you start to see the world differently, not as fixed, but as something constantly shifting beneath the surface. This is Empire Economics, where we break down the systems shaping your world, one story at a time. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Thanks for watching.